I'm Curtis Thorson. I am a principal lecturer here in the Department of Creative Professions and Digital Arts here at Greenwich. And I am very pleased to introduce our speakers today for this panel. Karen Chang will start. She comes from Kingston Design School. And we have Paula Veranda from Middlesex. And coming to us from Northern Ireland, Pip Shea. Did I pronounce that correctly? Very excellent. She's from Queen's University Belfast, reporting on a project that's done in collaboration actually with Queen's University Belfast and Ulster, from which we have some representation. So guaranteed softball question from the audience. And finally from Brunel, Annette Payne will be speaking about projects she's doing about an EU consortium on the roadmap in the creative industries. So much to do. 15 minutes. I'll give you a 5 minutes left warning, which will be an unsubtle wave of some kind.
This presentation is called Design by Spambot, and it's sort of a write-up of a research project funded by Creative Works London, but it's also used to contextualise some of my work into research methods. What's a Spambot? Unfortunately, it's not a robot with spam on it like the pretty picture that preceded this. It's a nasty bit of code that can infiltrate your system and cause your system to behave autonomously without you. And you know what spam is? It's unwanted mail, and a bot is short for robot, so it's sort of unwanted arrivals from Trojan viruses, and Trojan viruses are as bad as they sound. I'm using the term here to suggest a type of computer-generated automation implying some sort of dearth of authenticity, as in Potato Shop, which Nikki shared with us yesterday, and I've adopted. So the key to concepts of value in good design, as we know, and especially in high-end fashion, which is what we were funded to look at, is of course authenticity. Just wanted to wax a bit lyrical about notions of reproduction, authenticity and value, because it's so core to what I do. Of course, for us in the arts and humanities, the concept of authenticity is the proposition that the work can't be easily made or replicated, especially not by a robot. And of course, in Walter Benjamin's seminal paper in 1936, he presupposed that mechanical reproduction would lead to some form of art of the proletariat, which was destined to be a terrible thing. The proposition that the machine is the antithesis of creativity/humanity is really a supposition inherited from the French Enlightenment and a representation of a Cartesian divide. And something I'm interested in is questioning the notion that the machine and humanity are necessarily the antithesis of each other. So, the money we got from Creative Works was to look at mass customization. There are many designers at the moment and design companies looking at the potential for user-generated content in design process and bespoke manufacturing opportunities that digital media is affording us. On the common model, users design their own product and then share their work online in sort of lookbooks and online portfolios. So for me, the question is, how do we design for participation? How do we design to enable design? Oh, that's weird. Hold on. Sorry. I really like this phrase because it sums up everything that's difficult about being creative with machines. Sometimes the constraints of a system that's designed to enable design overpowers the design results, and you end up with an ugly version of systems aesthetics, where the constraints of the system overpower or somehow turn the product into a type of mannerism indicative of that system, which for me is the Potato Shop aesthetic. This is usually a result of poor use of the imagination or the system, where you could, to overcome that, for example, increase proficiency, work with preferences, work with settings, as Nikki pointed out yesterday. undergraduate students really should know what that window is about RGB settings, and they should be bothered. So there's a laziness, especially in younger people. I'm feeling a bit old now. It can also, of course, be the use of a poorly designed or oversimple system, and the system needs more sophisticated variables or project-specific plugins. And one of the things that's not unusual in research is to work with a software developer to write a specific tool to enable a specific type of outcome. For example, Jane Harris was at Kingston, and she worked to enable algorithms to more accurately represent satin, or it's actually like Tudor satin or something in Maya. Something I know nothing about, but because she couldn't get what she needed from the system. Or most often, it can be the result of a system that does not evolve through use. Now, a simple example of a system that evolves through use intentionally would be a big online computer game system where users are enabled to create mods or modulations to the system. They start building their own levels and becoming part of the author of the massive multiplayer online role-play game. Another example may be Amazon. Little used areas fall into disuse naturally. So I wanted to just add a slide here on interaction and complexity. And sophisticated interaction with a complex tool such as Photoshop can give rise to emergent behaviours, which are what we call in complex systems design degrees of unpredictable outcomes, which are really like the surrealist happy accidents. Photoshop's sophisticated enough to do that. There's no excuse for crap work coming out of Photoshop. The outcomes are, of course, enabled and constrained by the variables within the system. As a software designer, you predict what sort of emergent outcomes are going to be manifest through use when you decide the parameters of the system. Now, obviously, human interaction with analog media and tools is infinitely more complex than that offered by contemporary digital systems. And so that in reality, we have a much more infinitely unpredictable range of outcomes. But a well-designed digital system should include some facility for manual, if not automatic, moderations to the system, so that it evolves with us. Slight step back, contextualize it with the concept of the processes of meta-design, because if you're designing a system to enable design, you are engaged in meta-design. Even just by etymology and the definition of the word meta, you're designing something to enable people to design. It's meta-design. These are not my area of expertise, and amusingly, I dragged all this off Wikipedia, so I'm sort of using Photoshop badly now as well. But I have a colleague at work who's an expert in all this, and I'd like to think actually more deeply myself now, because I don't really think about this background much. I think about,
Press the space bar.
Okay, thank you. That's weird. Oh, there we are. This is what I think about, mostly. Digital meta-design methods. Parametric design, coming out of architecture, is a process based on algorithmic thinking that enables the expression of parameters and rules that define, encode, and clarify the relationship between the intent and the response. They constrain and enable the aesthetics of the outcome. It's a system. Generative design does something else, which the other presenter yesterday in Nikki's session touched upon, where there is a capacity for the system to start evolving things itself. And it can do it autonomously in generative design. You can set parameters and set up, especially artificial intelligence systems, set them up to start evolving things themselves. And I thought this was a beautiful bit of work from a guy called Dickie Ferd. We see a lot of aesthetics that look like that when we're looking at computer-generated systems, but that's particularly beautiful, I think you'll agree. And all he's done is add an extra parameter. He's set off a system to grow in a network structure using the lowest amount of surfaces possible. So just by adding an extra component to this system of rules, he started to constrain and create something original that looks original and is more pleasing to us. And my area of expertise, which I call rhizometric design, not rhizomatic, but rhizometric. A design process for complex evolving digital systems that makes use of big data to enable the system to evolve automatically in response to socio-cultural behaviours. A rhizome, if you don't know, is a model for culture that has no beginning or end. It's always in the middle, and in data representation and interpretation, it's a structure that allows for multiple non-hierarchical entry and exit points, like a big website. I hate to sort of blow this mystery, but I build big websites. That's what I do. Importantly, this complex, evolving, participatory structure is opposed to dualist categories and binary choices. It's about relationships and networks. And a metric is shorthand for complex web analytics. So if you're building a big digital system and it's cultural, and you collect the data at the back end, and you allow that data to co-evolve and define how the system evolves, you've got something that's living and breathing and growing through social and cultural use, which means you don't have to design it again, and you get paid more in the beginning. Okay, so back to reality for a moment, back to the rock face. This is the type of online mass customization that we're looking at, and this level of oversimplistic level of a system is not appropriate at all for high-end bag designers, which is what we were looking at. What makes a Bugatti a Bugatti? What makes a mulberry bag a mulberry bag? There are sophisticated shape grammars and aesthetics that are important to any product and any brand. This tool does not allow people to design, it allows people to author. 5 minutes, gosh, okay, that went quick. You're given a palette, and when you've designed your bag, you can share it. So you do get sort of product semantic memes from the user's designs floating around the system, but they're not fed back into the system, so it's not a rhizomatic system. The common model is actually, as I said, about authoring, not designing. There is no little parametrics in some examples. Sometimes you can't add a thin strap to a big handbag, for example. That's a bit of parametric design. But none of it is generative because the handbags come offline. And this is a bit what I was touching on yesterday about the printing. If a bag has to go to manufacture, you'd have to redesign the system every time there was a change in the manufacturing process. So there's very little generative product design online at the moment. But some of this could be easily rhizometric by allowing these semantic memes to inform the evolution of the system. We found that high-end bag designers wanted a variety of interaction with the customers at varying parts of the process, but they were all most bothered about maintaining the brand value. So we started looking at generative shape grammar lexicons specific to the brand. What makes that shape indicative of that brand? And also, what sort of branded mechanics could we include in these systems? What is really Mulberry and not something else? For example, being invited to queue. We know that Mulberry likes the fact that people queue. So, this is quite old now, but I really like it. It demonstrates how a brand has to earn media coverage these days. And I thought this was pertinent to the high-end products very much because they're not supposed to be accessible, they're not supposed to be user-generated, they need to be earned. And working with Andrew, who's not here as fashion designer, the idea that something has to be, you've got to be really thin or you've got to be really rich, there's got to be a barrier. High-end fashion's not supposed to be accessible, so we're having to design barriers into this stuff. And to that end, we use neurological research to measure people's emotional engagement with different parts of the system. A brand engagement is an emotional engagement. You only pay 500 quid for a bag because you're emotionally engaged in the values of that brand and the semantics of owning that product in a social context. So for us as designers, that's what we have to account for as systems designers. And it allows us to define specific emotions for specific brands and test specific mechanics. And that's me done.
So, hello. Thank you for being here with me now. I'm going to have to read my paper because otherwise I can't keep up with time, and I'm very afraid that you're going to tell me off afterwards.
There's no telling off. There are no
No, you should
punishments.
shut down the... So, I'm going to be talking about Swamois, which is a smartphone application or a dance artwork or vice versa. This is a case study for my PhD taking place in Middlesex University. And it's not my work, so I'm not going to take, I'm going to not talk about a practitioner's perspective. I'm placing myself very clearly, and that's part of my research as well, in the expert spectator perspective. So I want to address an emergent area in aesthetic terms, which is important in my opinion, to demonstrate the quality and the significance of this artwork and argue for that. To pursue that, I am borrowing notions and procedures from dance and new media studies, and I customized a method to study Swamois. And in addition to discerning its intrinsic characteristics, I also wanted to relate the work with issues of wider significance, since the potential to provide evidence for theoretical discussions can be essential for the evaluation of an artwork. And so I chose as a framework, in this case, the debate about the primacy of vision and the ideal of disembodiment that are considered to prevail still in digital culture. And I'll just review these ideas very briefly. In New Philosophy for New Media, Hansen underlined in 2004 how this subject remained then a concern in new media theory. Some things have changed, but still, the enthusiasm of the mind traveling free from bodily constraints and fiction identities that we can adopt nowadays with texts and avatars are examples that an epistemological split between body and mind, rooted in Cartesian rationalism in the 17th century, so 400 years ago, is perpetuated in contemporary culture. But Dixon in Digital Performance argues that digital artists with a performing arts background challenge these beliefs and these infatuations. When performing in cyberspace, they maintain an unequivocal relationship with the real and search for a close harmony between mental creativity and physical dexterity. So Dixon's observations support my own conviction that new media dances naturally contradict associations of the digital with the artificial and with disembodiment. And these are, I believe, mistaken assumptions that inhibit further practice that I think is much needed nowadays, engagement from dance artists in these technologies. Funnily enough, the performance panel is taking place just beside me, so I actually have been put away of the performance sector. But I don't have a problem with that. Anyway, so what is the concept of techno-aesthetics which I'm using to analyze this work? It was developed by Frank Popper to study multimedia, multisensorial and interactive art practices. Virtual art contributes, in Popper's view, to the humanization of computer technologies, and the artists engaged develop specific skills to make their innovative and creative research, and they expand the technologies beyond their original purpose and context. We've heard a little bit of this with Jenny's presentation in the keynote. Moreover, Popper adds, they interpret social and political concerns emerging with technological development. Hence these practices, they assist individuals or communities to cope with the fast flux of information, the compression of time and space, and contact with machines that characterize contemporary life. Summarizing Popper's argument, the artists have a techno-aesthetic creative commitment, and they work in the interests of humankind. Keeping these ideas in mind, I have analyzed Swamois with a structuralist approach. So this is a little bit geeky PhD stuff on methodology, but very brief. Focusing in components and their connections to understand the work's internal functioning. Because we have to see how are we going to then study these works, which are the appropriate frameworks and the appropriate method to study them. And that was part of my work as well. So I've looked at the components and their connections to understand the work's internal functioning. And I could thus recognize in what ways some choices were technologically determined. How did the artists transfer principles of the dance medium into this work that is now totally mediated? And why did I find this work original and compelling? My analysis included, oh, I forgot this, didn't I? Should I put it on now? I just saw that, sorry. Maybe not. Sorry, I forgot this. Do I have to put it on? Yes. I'll just do like this, it's fine. Okay. So, but my analysis included as well an interpretative approach in order to look for the thematic focus and the cultural issues this work could relate with. And in doing so, of course, a subjective reading is implied, where I count my look as an individual and the context I belong to. And as well, in this case particularly, this reading is influenced by the actual immersive physical experience that comes with this transaction, since the work is interactive. So the fact that how we experience the work physically is very important to account for it. To examine the intrinsic dance qualities of a digital artwork, I engaged with analytical approach that come from dance that have been previously developed by Achid Lansdale, Thomas, Preston Dunlop, and Sanchez Kohlberg. But I have also applied Popper's conceptualization to an artwork where dance has a principal position with the will to find what is the technostatic commitment of the authors of Soi Moi, and how may their piece work in the interests of humankind. So I am trying to find how I can use different disciplinary frameworks to merge on the same artwork. So let's just have a little then look. I have to do, I think, this. This was the way we managed to do it run smoothly.
Full screen.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to just stop now. You can watch the video and buy the app. I have the app as well in my phone if you want to try one of these days. I just find it funny when I'm presenting this on a big screen when this is kind of actually to be seen on a small screen. Anyway, this is just to give an idea. Tick, tick, da-da, da-da, and oh, sorry. I'm ruining someone else's surprise. Sorry for that. Ah, okay, great. So
let's go and have just a very quick look at what then can we analyze about Sois-moi. So, an account of Sois-moi must first consider the unusual venue where the artwork instantiates. The interface is the iPhone, as you saw, and we can buy the work for the Apple Store for €8. And this condition derives from the innovative practice-based inquiry intended by the artists. They wanted to explore the interactive modalities of the device and see how these could influence the happening of a dance. They wanted to use the potential of the tool in full and stimulate with a conversation occurring between the performer and the user, kinesthetic perception and self-awareness, transforming the everyday experience in a poetic one. My following step concentrated in the content of the work, looking at how it was structured in 12 segments that are linked but are autonomous, and the components. It is a woman dancer, almost always appearing in full size, in a very small scale, and wearing shorts and vest. We could actually analyze the work in the terms she is dressed and how we touch her, but I'm not going to go through that. But it is a possibility of reading. The movement is organized in micro-choreographies with pedestrian and stylized movement. It was done with motion capture and combines various kinds of vocabularies. And the place where the dance happens is made of constructed surreal scenarios, as well as real-time captured environments. Again, the sound also has predetermined scores, and in 2 cases can be added by the user, either from his or her library or the singing, for example. Another aspect to take in consideration is the interactive design and the action we can do as users. We can choose from the menu and we affect and feed the environment by shaking, blowing, touching, rotating or singing to this performer. In Sois-moi, I see various aspects that Popper considers distinctive in virtual art becoming evident. The choice of a single character is a knowledgeable strategy to deal with technical constraints. A single body significantly facilitates data collection and file weight, which are determinant for post-production and the system's responsive capacity. Anyone who has worked with dance knows this. Digital representations of moving human bodies are technically demanding, and they can look fairly uncanny. And contrarily, this dance is not made by an awkward puppet. Here, the performer is convincingly skillful and emotionally engaging, and the choices undertaken in the oral and visual domain reinforce the immersive quality of the experience together with this dancer. I also see solo performance as a good choice to highlight the problem of solitude, which is related to the increase of versatile and inexpensive communication media that we have today accessible. And reinforcing this idea, the woman in Sois-moi invites the solo user to an intimate exchange that eschews isolation, and we could say eventually heats up the materials of the computerized devices. Hence the reading with the body naked, no. So having interactivity as a formative condition is also an important aspect to considerate, and Sois-moi welcomes a non-specialized but nonetheless creative partaking, which is required for the work to become actual. So the artists, they desire the audience subjective action into their artwork, and they depend on that for their artwork to exist. However, the user cannot change the performer's behavior or appearance and reflects ethical concerns regarding the way one should relate with the other, respecting individual will and body-based boundaries. Yes, I'm nearly finished. Finally, the technologies of reproduction, information and communication were used with a different purpose, as Popper remarked artists do. The utilitarian functions are transcended because the artists have thoughtfully reinstated the human body's protagonist role to generate ephemeral encounters with the imaginary and the unspeakable. In this process of poetic and playful experience, body and mind are intensely present and connected, and they contaminate the codes and machines with human subjectivity. Now, just to finally wrap up, yes, the primacy of vision and the ideal of disembodiment may still be prevailing, as Hansen highlighted, But as Popper remarked, artists have a techno-aesthetic creative commitment that may change this. And for Dixon, and I agree, performance artists have a sensual embodied approach to cyberspace that can change the way we relate with the screen images and we represent ourselves in the networks. I think Swamois demonstrates these possibilities. And I also consider that the choreographers have successfully dealt with the challenge of instantiating dance in a new place, that which belongs to the user's personal life, displays in our hand, lives inside our pocket, as opposed to the theatre, for example, or the cinema. Furthermore, I see that Swamois, in terms of a communicative exchange, has a good balance between the author's statement and the audience's participation. Thank you very much.
Okay, hello everybody. My name's Pip Shea. I work at Queen's University in Belfast. I'm going to be presenting this paper, Northern Ireland's Creative Meshworks, Tracing Ad Hoc Knowledge Exchange, on behalf of the CXNI research project, which stands for Creative Exchange Northern Ireland. So just a bit of background about CXNI. It's an AHRC knowledge exchange initiative, and it's led by the University of Ulster and Queen's. Now, the remit of our project is to explore the structures and dynamics that enable and inhibit connections between people, place, and technology in Northern Ireland. And we support the region's ecology of creative activity through research-led programs and interventions with a specific focus on solo and micro creative practitioners and the different ways that they are interfacing with academics and academic research. So our investigations of the catalysts for creative collaboration have focused on 7 case studies. These 7 projects were chosen as they actively tested the boundaries between academic research and practice-based collaborations through small-scale pilot projects. And this paper discusses 2 of these cases. The first one, Maker Day Belfast, was an event that was held a couple of months ago, and it facilitated practices of collaboration through design thinking and prototyping. And the second project is Open Curriculum, which is a software project for supporting collaborative curriculum development. Now, we use Tim Ingold's idea of meshworks to reveal the entanglements that shape the exchange of knowledge between arts and humanities researchers and the creative sector in Northern Ireland. This frame, the meshwork, helps us trace the textures, fissures, bridges, lines, and nodes facilitating collaboration, revealing what Ingold calls the fluxes and flows of materials, shaping knowledge exchange processes. Now, to support the use of the conceptual frame of the meshwork, we draw on the structures and dynamics of wireless mesh networking technology. Now, wireless network nodes connect to each other in an ad hoc fashion based on criteria such as signal strength and physical proximity. Adrian Mackenzie's proposal that wirelessness is an emergent social condition is also used to help illustrate meshwork dynamics. And we draw particular attention to the human and non-human assemblies that generate and facilitate the passing of ideas between practitioners and academics, arguing that seemingly ad hoc processes encourage new forms of creativity and problem solving. Okay, so emergent peer-to-peer organisational forms such as co-working spaces and social media are reconfiguring the dynamics of creative collaboration in Northern Ireland. And these platforms for making and connecting are delivering new opportunities for creative practitioners and researchers to have an impact on one another. To situate these dynamics of influence as ad hoc is to argue that collaborations happen as needs arise or when opportunities appear. And these aren't new catalysts for collective work, but the ways in which they are being performed are changing. So emergent peer-to-peer organisational forms reflect Alvin Toffler's prediction that adhocracies defined by kinetic organisations that were constantly changing would figure heavily in our future. And there is a lot of ad hoc peer-to-peer organisation occurring in Northern Ireland, as evidenced by the following. There are lots of meetups, there's lots of support for crowdfunding initiatives, and there are a handful of co-working spaces for designers and makers. But now onto our case studies. Okay, so Maker Day Belfast, as I mentioned, was a creative collaborative design weekend focusing on physical and digital making. It was developed by Michelle Douglas, who's a designer and a PhD student at the University of Ulster, and supported by designer Stephen McGilloway and Richard McElveen from the University of Ulster. And the organisers' rationale for the event was to expose collaborative making as a positive influence in the design of innovative concepts and products. The event it was a 24-hour event, and it encouraged a variety of creative practitioners and researchers to join industry experts from the UK and Ireland to respond to themes. They were kind of provocative themes that were just a handful of keywords. So this example here, this group had 3 keywords: rural, Northern Ireland, and elderly. So there were 4 teams in total, and they all just signed up, I think, on Eventbrite and rocked up on the day. None of them really knew each other. And they were put into 4 teams, and they all used soft modelling materials and digital fabrication tools to co-design imaginative working prototypes. And the teams were organised so that people from different disciplines were lumped together. And there were quite a few materials on offer to play with. The Belfast Makerspace Farset Labs donated a bunch of Arduinos and Intel Galileos, and Belfast's Fab Lab donated their 3D printer for the day and 2 of their STEAM offices to help people actually use the machine. There was also lots of sticky tape, bits of cardboard and cable ties, and a decent wireless network. And at the end of the weekend, teams showcased their design solutions. And in roughly 24 hours, the groups had designed interfaces, branding, and functional software. And one group had even offered their source code on GitHub for reuse. Which brings us on to our next case study, Open Curriculum. This project was proposed and implemented by Chris Murphy, a multidisciplinary design educator at the University of Ulster again, in collaboration with the Belfast-based web development agency Little Thunder. Now, this team set themselves the task of using GitHub, a web-based platform for managing and sharing software source code, to facilitate the co-creation and sharing of educational content. Now, this team were drawn to GitHub as it has unique features that track content changes between users, otherwise known as version control. But it looks like this. So they set out to build a user-friendly web interface that utilised GitHub's version control features for open collaborative curriculum development. Now, they're still actually working on the interface, and they're aiming to offer it for free to other educators, and also they're going to develop a series of video tutorials to help other educators develop their own open curriculum sites. But through their software tinkering, they did realise that GitHub was a really good content management system, so they're now using it to host their course website. Okay, so in the case of Maker Day, practitioners and researchers who had known each other for a couple of hours successfully self-organised around topics to develop working prototypes. Processes were ad hoc, makeshift, and cobbled together to communicate or illustrate ideas. And the exchange of knowledge was distributed as designers incorporated findings from academic papers into their design rationales. And in the case of open curriculum, processes of self-organisation occurred through the use of Twitter mainly. When the team was stuck on a problem, they consulted their Twitter networks and sometimes received answers to their problems within a few minutes. And in one case, a 15-year-old web developer from England wrote a blog post with a workaround for a problem that they faced, and somebody else just wrote some code for them because they wanted to help out. Okay, so back to the mesh networks. These wireless networks are distributed systems that self-organize in an ad hoc fashion. If one node goes down, the rest of the nodes can still communicate with each other directly or through one or more intermediate nodes. Now, the material structures of mesh networks offer us a reference point for imagining ad hoc organizational forms. And familiarizing ourselves with the dynamics of wireless mesh networks also helps us with the introduction of Mackenzie's wirelessness, a conceptual framework we found productive for our study of creative collaborations in Northern Ireland. Okay, so wirelessness, according to Mackenzie, is a disordered flow and an entanglement with things, gadgets, infrastructures, and services. And most importantly, it is the promise of ubiquitous network connectivity. Wirelessness is helping us to negotiate new contexts. And in many cases, wirelessness also stabilizes our transitions through location-specific information and familiar rituals. And ubiquitous connectivity also brings very different scales into surprising contact. So to tie all of this back to knowledge exchange in the arts and humanities, the promise of wireless connectivity, which helps us transition, bridge contexts, and interface at different scales, is similar to the promise of knowledge exchange. We want to have the tools to bridge divides between theory and practice, and between practitioners and researchers with different evaluative frameworks. And we want to negotiate the different scales of large bureaucracies and solo creatives, of local challenges and global opportunities. And we want all of this to happen in a relatively stable environment. So this study has thrown up the following provocations for future research. What constitutes stability in knowledge exchange projects? How might uneven distribution in peer-to-peer systems be addressed by academic partnerships? And how can the idea of connectivity be used as a departure point for knowledge exchange collaborations? Thank you.
I'm going to present to you some preliminary results of an EU consortium funded project called CREAM, Creativity Research Adaptive Roadmap. This is a huge project running over 2 years where we're trying to roadmap the future of technology in the creative industries and the creative fields. So, this project is a 2-year EU-funded project, pan-European. We've got about 12, 15 different partners in different European countries, running until September 2015. And CREAM stands for Creativity Research Adaptive Roadmap, because that's hopefully what we're going to end up with. These are the main aims of the project. Primarily, we want to map the future of ICT research and development and the agenda for that for the creative sectors, which is a huge task. That we then hope, and the EU hope, will guide the development of new tools for supporting the creative processes, as well as enhance and improve existing tools and platforms to hopefully loosen the boundaries of creativity. Alongside that, we hope that through our various activities and our websites and our blogs, that we will bring the ICT and creative communities together in a way that they haven't been before, hopefully to foster collaborations. And to do this, we are collecting what we call future visions and desired scenarios, and I'll explain that. Okay, so this is a bit more detail about the project. We currently have nearly 400 stakeholders who are then acting as hubs for engaging people in the various clusters, as we call them. The stakeholders and their associates and partners are divided into 7 clusters: art, video and gaming, music, e-publishing, design, architecture, and something we call new media. We're trying to organise them into these focus groups to identify challenges and visions in the different clusters, because as you will see, and I'll present to you 3 clusters, there are subtle differences between them and nuances between them. At our various events that we've organised across Europe so far, we've also invited not only people from the creative clusters, but ICT people as well. So we're trying to bridge that gap of communication between the technology people and the more creative people. We're also interviewing all our stakeholders, which is, as you can imagine, is a huge task, and having workshops with them too. So we really are drilling down into what these guys want. Those that can't get to our events, for whatever reason, are engaging through our website to continue discussions maybe that they've had at workshops, and to collaborate and engage further. This is the sort of methodology we're using to collect this data. We're asking the stakeholders, partners, creative clusters to come up with their visions of ICT, how they would use it, what sort of tools they see themselves using, with money no object, with no technological constraint. So we're trying to get them to expand their imagination into what they would like to do, and then put that into scenarios. So we're trying to see not only what they would like, but how they're going to use it, what context are they going to use it in order that we can hopefully map that through. We've collected data from 3 clusters so far, although these clusters are still ongoing. The amount of data we've collected, as you can imagine, is huge. So I am not going to go through every scrap of data, you'll be pleased to hear. All of it, including the visions and scenarios, are on our website. But what I am going to try and do is give you a theme, of, an idea of the themes that have come out from those 3 clusters. And what I've done is, I've done a thematic analysis of all the replies, which has taken quite a while, as you can imagine, from these 3 clusters. So starting with art, these are the sort of things that they would really like. Themes that came out was they wanted enhanced interactivity and immersion for the public. They want people to really engage with their art through technology. So more multi-sensory art, being able to engage with art with not only touch but also maybe smell. There was people talking about emotions and lots of interactivity. There was also a lot of complaints directed towards the ICT people about how unuser-friendly some of the technology is. They'd like more GUI interfaces, graphical interfaces, higher specifications of usability, and trying to match the platforms between artists and the ITC communities. Also, interestingly, they were lacking permanent digital data storage for their artwork, which can be large files, and therefore, cloud computing even falls short there sometimes. New tools, they were talking about things like 360 scanning, multi-sensory creation, virtual studios where artists can work together even if they aren't in the same location. Artificial intelligence and genetic algorithms for evolutionary stuff, which you touched on in your talk. Voice command software, if we can actually create something. They were talking about creating installations by speaking to the hardware. And 3D printers using a wider range of materials. Other things that came out was the audience engagement. They wanted not only people to be able to interact with the artwork, but also to be able to discuss it, to reach people, to reach audiences that at the moment don't engage with art. And they were thinking about better social web tools, being able to scan installations or content to reach a wider audience. And also ontologies, to be able to lead, to engage audiences by leading them into new experiences that they may not have already thought they would enjoy. You've enjoyed this, so how about having a look at this if you like that? The other big thing that came out with the artists, which didn't really come out with the other two clusters that we've done so far, is affordability. They are the most cash-strapped group, and therefore open sourceware and decreasing printing costs in 3D were would be particularly favoured. Then the media cluster. In this cluster we're looking at obviously audio, visual media, filming, that sort of cluster. Here we've included some of the big names in media, Channel 4, BBC, those sorts of world broadcasting companies. And they, like the artists, wanted enhanced interactivity and immersion for the public. They want to be able to engage the public in media so that they can influence what the storylines of the programmes are, what the films are. They want sensors, games in public places so that you can go out and you can actually enjoy a game or a film in public places. It can be a shared experience. Increased broadband width, we want that. User-friendly big data crunching so that they can really see what their audiences are enjoying, and mobile technology, of course. Some of the tools, Wi-Fi tracking, where are people watching these films? Community cooperation, real-time creative production, and location-based automated narratives, so you can get a narrative based on where you are. And again, audience engagement, so that you can actually interact with whatever it is you're watching and influence it. And again, wider broadband width. Architecture. Again, like the artists and to some extent the media people, they wanted more architect-friendly tools, but they also spoke about smart buildings, buildings that can sense the environment, can sense when there's lots of people inside them so that they cool down, sense that there is you might need noise buffering at a particular point, or the blinds coming down because the sun's reached that orientation of the sky, for example. They'd like to see more open source software. And matchmaking, they were the ones who seemed to be the least able to engage with ICT people and other disciplines. They would like customised software tools, better 3D printing, that you can see a sort of theme coming through here. They wanted more accessibility, more software that's more interactive with its environment, so that they could influence their designs that way. So taking all of those ideas, we then asked, as I said, for them to put them into scenarios. So we can set them into context, we can see exactly why they would want 3D scanning, why they would want more materials to be printed on a 3D printer. And those are the things that we are currently discussing both face-to-face in workshops and online, and we'd encourage people to go and have a look at the scenarios and see whether they can give some feedback on them. And then those scenarios we're going to put into roadmaps in order to influence the funding of technology. To summarise then, across all three clusters, there were themes that came out. They all want the ability to realise and visualise their creation, to experience it in situ if possible. They want better user-friendly software and novel ways of interacting with it to enable to open up different ways of creating. They want better networking and collaborative capability, particularly across disciplines. So not just architects, but architects with artists, with designers. They want intelligent software to feed back on the creations and to engage the public. And to decouple creativity software with direct revenue. So to try and get away from this idea that software needs to bring back direct revenue in itself. The revenue could come from the next development down the line, which is a building or an art installation or a blockbuster film. So, you know, more sort of foresight on the investors. This is the consortium, which is currently steering this project. I'm from Brunel. The other major partner is University of Surrey, but as you can see, we're pan-Europe. And we'd really like it if more people would go onto the website and have a look and perhaps give their feedback and any suggestions they might have in their particular discipline and enter into one of our clusters. Thank you.
So, questions, comments? Rosalind?
Yeah, this is a question for Annette. So in, well, certainly in one of the sessions I did earlier, there was a lot of discussion around data collection, data storing, data mining, and how that relates to software applications that, you know, and as everything gravitates towards the cloud, the way that all this software that's being made that's very user-friendly to use gathers their data and helps the companies. So I just wondered, and that seems to be quite a live issue, that whole question of data and who it belongs to and who makes money out of it. I just wondered if that figured at all in these discussions, because it wasn't, you didn't really highlight it, but I wondered if it
No, I think people talked about it. We're trying to steer people into more thinking about applications for creative something rather than collecting the data. Or am I misunderstanding what you were?
Well, it's just that it kind of seems it's impossible to separate them, really.
Okay.
in the tools that people may be using, you know, for creative means, also allow companies to collect data. And say, for example, with Channel 4, I would say that they would be very much concerned to see how much, you know, what they can.
Yeah,
so,
I mean,
yeah, that would be an important priority. But I just wondered if that may.
It has come up, the fact that you know, you can. I think the major worry for most people was if the data was collected surreptitiously, if you engaged, if you actually, if people permitted their data to be collected, so there was some sort of opt-in, then people weren't so worried about that. But for things like, you know, what people were watching and how long they stayed on a particular scene or something like that, as long as they were doing it with their consent, people weren't so.
There weren't any discussions about how that consent might be provided or sort of innovation in that area. That seemed to be something that came up as an area.
Yeah, no, we didn't really touch on that, but it's interesting, and it's maybe something that we should put onto the website and see what people think about that area. I think, yeah, particularly in media.
375 stakeholders going to get income streams from the metadata, so flag it up.
Yeah, but it's certainly, particularly in the media cluster, I could put that or you could post that question up and see what people think, because I think it's a very valid point. Yeah.
We deal with that. If you want to talk further.
Oh, please, yeah.
Well, I gave a paper in Cuba at Easter about how it's not actually difficult for us to have a model of how the Arab Spring unfolded and or was engineered through the use of social media. And it was quite enjoyable to suggest it may have been engineered standing in Havana. So there's huge questions, because most people are giving their own data away. Brilliant. Yeah, and I already am involved in lots of commercial projects where we embed income streams from the use of the metadata, and also towards engineering behaviour change from the users. I am ethical, but lots of, because I'm from a university, but there are obviously people who do what I do, who earn a lot more, who might not be so concerned.
Yeah, it just seems to me like it is a whole area to be discussed as part of this kind of roadmap.
Yeah, I'm personally pushing for an extension to the Data Protection Act, because you should have the right to sell on your behavioural data and or not have your behaviour manipulated.
I agree, it's an important point which we should broach, because they have brought up this idea of using artificial intelligence to guide then creativity. So
Nudge.
yeah, exactly. So it's, yeah, and presumably it would be through data like that.
Yeah.
Well, we had a whole keynote yesterday from Sarah and Liz, which is basically an AI intervention in creative thinking, of lateral thinking, helping spur lateral thinking. So that kind of development is obviously on in a variety of places.
It's absolutely brilliant what we can potentially nudge, but selling more shit shouldn't be our main object.
Maybe shit sells. Maybe shit sells. That's the problem. Shit probably sells better than
More on that note, more questions?
Okay, I'll ask Karen a question. In terms of the whole potato shop idea,
Yeah, Nikki's Fraser's girlfriend.
just this idea of any system that you use ends up always looking like it was made in that system, so that you can see what's made in Photoshop. Everything in Flash ends up looking like it's made in Flash. Everything in Unity ends up looking like it's made in Unity, despite the fact that the possibilities are endless. Is there a relationship, do you think, there between the culture of the use of these things? That it, as you're saying, the people and the machines are not separate, that you kind of bond into expectation?
Well, it's like good use, and it's like good craft and bad craft. You could say the same thing about using a lathe. You know, somebody uses it in a very predictable way that's useful, and somebody else is innovating with it. So for me, it's just about that we should always be innovating when we're making things.
So any reliance on it, so you can't sort of make the ultimate system, because people will always do that with it. So
Yeah, there's no such thing as the ultimate system.
Yeah.
That's why robots won't take over.
Yeah.
In case anybody's wondering.
Well, they were made by people anyway, weren't they? So they'll...
Yeah, but I quite like the idea of mannerism, like when painting became really entrenched in its own rhetoric. That's exactly what we're looking at. There's no difference, I don't think. Just poor use, poor practice.
We don't have digital creativity, we have digital mannerism.
Well, you do have digital creativity, but you also have digital mannerism, and you have digital rubbish as well. You know, what we make. I mean, we all make brilliant things, and we all make rubbish. It's a bit hit and miss, isn't it?
Do you think it's poor though, or do you think it's cultural that people will actually gravitate towards belonging in some way, and so they kind of they assume that that's the culture that they're buying into and becoming part of. And I know a lot of people that kind of make games have that attitude when they go into it.
Well, we were discussing earlier, it's like the handbag thing. I had a hell on with the commercial partners to say that bag designers don't start off with the shape. They might start off with a building or the wind or something. You know, so if you're working within the genre and you're entrenched within the genre, then you're not necessarily innovating. So one of the things for us in computer games is, you know, step back. I teach game design. It's like, what's a game? What's a design? You know, don't talk to me about Call of Duty and all the rest of it. You know, it's good design, isn't it? Or good print. Whichever end you call it. Yours being craft, mine being design.
I'd like to direct the question to Paula, and also to yourself, I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name, to a computer person.
Sorry, you're not a computer person.
Sorry, I am really, but I'm a designer.
Okay. Well, when I looked at was watching the app, which I thought was absolutely fascinating, so I think we've shown that. I think it's a wonderful notion.
I have no commission by, I don't have any, I'm not selling the app.
No, I understand. Good research.
It's really,
I
because I
understand
do
that.
believe it's the case.
What I was going to say from the research, I can understand, methodologically, how you're working and what you were trying to find out from that. And I think, that's admirable. But I'm also very interested in that app. As a theatre practitioner point of view, I can see transmedia, I can see that some sort of interaction can go on here that would be more of an immersive, if there was such a thing, that the person is actually using this app. So this is my direction still. Do you think the technology is possible to do this? And from your research, do you think, if you did say that you were looking at just the one dancer, do you think this is going to be possible in the very near future? To be able to create something that's more theatrical, that's more theatre?
I don't understand very well what you mean with the theatrical.
Well, just having, say, more than one person that are interacting.
Well, there is solo dance. The solo performance in dance is it's part of the whole. It's part of the whole culture of dance, and there are big solos like very famous because they are solo dance. So there, it's not theatrical because of that.
Yeah.
You can have more people, I suppose, but you can probably develop on those possibilities. But what I'm saying is, in terms of dance representation, that is quite difficult. And motion capture, which was what we were using, but even Kinect, I tried with Kinect. It's not at all as easy as it's sold, and there are huge problems. And so, but there's also the engagement with the solo user that probably made that more adequate for the solo audience. So
I think also the way you do it, gesture-based anything relies on computer vision. So you'd have to develop a language of dance, which, as we know, there is one. And what interested me most was how the dance had to be different to fit in a small screen. So it is theoretically possible to develop a lexicon of dance moves and link it to some sort of interaction with the back. Because for me, I'd like to see some real interaction with the dancer and the changing backgrounds.
Exactly.
So it's not rhetorical and my interpretation, but there's a you say there is.
And then it's at the command of the person who's
no, but
actually
you can do that
operating.
with the app. You can change the backgrounds.
But does the dancer then change? I mean, does the dancer, the dancer avatar, as it were, respond to the change in the background? No, but you could. You need.
But this is why it's going to be so immersive, because it will be in the hands of whoever is operating.
Yeah.
That they can make transmit. They could make some sort of story.
Yeah, there's no reason why not.
Right. Yeah. Can you take the project then?
Yeah.
She's the computer person.
Sorry. Well, that's really interesting. Thank you.
More questions? If we have no further questions, shall we thank the panel?